research
back.
is aligned to your
So, pasensya,
program.
busy lang po talaga.
So if you are
ngayon, nakapag-decide ako na mag-live while doing
you are
my
expected to do a
master's
Filipino thing.
degree class.
So ganun yun eh.
So,
Pag BS biology ka, hindi mo naman pwedeng gawin na narrative about the story of lalok yung ilalagay mo doon. So it should be aligned, related to the discipline where you are in. Part yun ng tinatawag natin part yun sa mga consideration natin. So the choice of a research topic and the way it is researched are influenced not only by the researcher's origin. Again, na-mention to kanina, the researcher's interest, and of course, na-mention ko ngayon, background. But also by their work environment, academic environment, the contacts and opportunities that they offer. So sociological assumption is practically asking the question, where are you coming from as a researcher? What is your background? But again, we will put more delineation kung ano yung mga sociological assumptions base sa theoretical traditions. Now, pag sinabi nating teleological assumptions, I would like to subscribe to the thoughts of Moulton and Maries in 1990. This is more concerned with the purpose or aim why the research is going to be conducted. Dito pumapasok yung tinatawag nating research intent. What is the research intent? Ito yun, the teleological assumption. So researchers met the theoretical orientations or the theoretical traditions influence their purpose why they do a set of research. Ito na yung mga sinasabi natin. If you are a positivist researcher, your studies aim to determine relationships, whether it's a cause and effect or correlational relationship between and among variables. And your purpose is to generalize to a certain population and to may validate a certain theory. But if you are an interpretivist researcher, the goal may be, the intent may be is to understand multiple realities. The goal is to unmask, is to unmask the different layers of meanings. So if you try to see, meron silang merong differences when it comes to intention. So when you do your research, ano ba ang intention? Because your intention in doing the research is highly affected by your theoretical tradition. So first and foremost, know yourself. Ano ba ang theoretical tradition? So, a teleological assumption is practically asking what we want to achieve through our research and what is our, palaging tinatanong, what is the theoretical impact of the study? The third one, ito yung pinakagusto ko yung ontological assumption. Sabi ko kanina, the different theoretical traditions differ on their ontological stance, how they understand reality. So basically, if we dissect the word ontological, ontology, it is the study of being or reality. So this is the original philosophical sense of it. It's concerned with the reality that is being investigated. And there are different domains of assumption, different beliefs about nature, structure, status of social phenomena. And
hi to viewers.
I have a photo that I'm going to show you. Just give me a sec. I'd like to show you this photo. I actually love this photo. Can you see the photo?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Off pa lang mic.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ito yung pinaka-favorite ko na photo. Sometimes, isa ka lang maliit na kusing. feeling mo you are a king of the jungle. That's how you perceive reality. Ganun yung tingin mo sa mundo. I mean, that's how you get sense of the world. That's the reality that you are seeing. So, the question could be, in relation to your research, the question would be is, what is the appropriate object for the study? Unsa pa gyud dapat na akong istudihan? And what do I want to know? Minsan, ang estudyante, when they are asked, what do you want to know? Medyo nahihirapan silang sagutin yun eh. What do you want to know? Because what do you want to know will help you shape how do you want to know what you want to know. So yun, so yung mga relationship na mga ganun. So, I have here, the last part is the epistemological assumption. Epistemology is concerned with the nature of knowledge, its possibility, its scope, its general basis. And according to
Good
Mertens,
morning, everyone.
what is the nature of knowledge and the relationship between the knower and the would-be knower? Namutala na siya, no? What is the relationship between the knower and the would-be knower? So, if we put that into a question, and how can we come to know? How can we come to the knowledge of it? Let us put it simple. How can we know? Now, this question is related to the ontological question na, what do I want to know? Tapos the epistemological assumption naman is, how can we know? So, yeah, but again, maybe this is highly theoretical, but let us try to proceed to the next slide and let us see how are we going to be changed. So we try to differentiate here the theoretical traditions and theoretical assumptions. Ito yung traditions, ito yon. Ito naman yung assumptions. Okay? So, the sociological assumption of positivism and post-positivism, they believe that there is a single paradigm. There is a single reality that is not affected by individual, internal, or personal reality. Ito yung saan sila galing, no? Remember the question, saan ka ba galing? What is your context? Ito yun. They believe, generally, they believe that there is a single paradigm. There's a single reality. Doon sila galing. That's the belief that they are coming from. So when they go out, they believe there is a reality out there that is not affected by internal or personal reality, which is highly external to all of them. While interpretivism, on its sociological assumption, believe that there's a multiple layer of realities residing in the individual person. I think the mask of Ra would be very useful in that illustration. But I forgot the strict concept, so I may not be able to present it with you. But I think that the unmasking, the illustration of the unmasking shows that there is a multiple layer of realities residing in the individual person. And also, I've mentioned here cultural relativism, because
Hi to
cultural
viewers, good
relativism is the
morning.
ability to understand a culture on its own terms and not to make judgments using standards of one's own culture. Ang problema dito, not problema, but one of the issues here that can be perceived is yung tinatawag na cultural bias. Because he believes there's a single reality. So, ito lang yung totoo, ito lang yun. So, any reality contradicting his reality may be an issue. So, I'm supposed to write here, cultural bias. Because they view that there is a certain singular reality out there, unaffected by external forces. Ito naman is understanding of cultural differences. Medyo ito open-minded ito. Ito siya leading towards a discussion on singularity. So on the teleological assumption, positivism and post-positivism, they believe that there is a scientific explanation or prediction or control in, especially during the traditional, judicial period of the positivist educational research. And there is an explanation of phenomena by means of empirically determined regularities. So, phenomena here, this one here, the phenomena is viewed from empirically determined regularities. What do we mean by empirically determined realities? This is more of a prediction, control, explanation, leading to that kind of
Hello po, sorry if hindi ko kayo ma-entertain masyado. Nag-take
so
note po ako.
the end product of doing research from the positivist and post-positivist lenses is towards generalization. Meaning, it's not individual anymore, it's more collective. It's generalization. But interpretivism, on the other hand, is more of understanding and reconstruction and transfer of findings. So where the aim of inquiry here is the critique and transformation of social, political, economic, cultural, ethnic, and gender structures that constrain and exploit humankind by engagement in confrontation and conflict. So here, for example, they do a phenom study. They try to let us understand experiences of cancer patients, lived experiences of individuals with HIV. So dito yan siya. It's more individual. So the purpose is to reconstruct, to help us understand. The purpose here is to predict and control, explain, and generalize. So this is more using, I don't want to say scientific approaches because I will be argued, but to the very letter of scientific processes. So, ontological assumption. The ontological assumption of positivism, it assumes that there is an apprehendable reality. Saan ko ba nilagay? Okay. Apprehendable reality. So I wrote here that belief in a tangible social reality existing independently of those creating the reality. The social reality can exist just as the natural reality exists. So they assume that there is this apprehendable reality. And there exists an objective, stable, and singular reality out there which is independent of human perception of things. So kahit ano man yung sasabihin mo, kahit ano yung iniisip mo, there is a reality out there that is independent from your own thinking. That's the assumption
Tamsak
of
na po, Ma'am Farah. Hi, Ma'am
positivism.
April Rose. Salamat sa tamsak.
The assumption that reality can be fully
Hello po,
apprehended
new friend
and is
po.
not dependent
Tamsak na
on
po.
human
Thank you.
observer implies that
You
it is
Henyo
invariant,
TV. Hi.
allowing for
Hi po,
the
patulong bag
determination
vlogger
of
lang po
cause and
ako.
effects
Hi,
and the
Bax
formulation
Molins.
of theory or a certain framework.
Good morning, host. Good morning, Chef
So accordingly,
Master Deco.
again, the assumption is that
Patulong
reality
po
can
sa channel
only be
ko,
discovered
Tamsak
through
Ganto. Thank you
observation.
po, Chef Master
Observation
Deco.
using
Good
the
morning,
senses,
music
meaning
lovers.
that anything
Subscribe na po.
that cannot be
Kayo
observed,
subscribe niyo po yung mga
cannot be
nandito sa
perceived by
comment.
senses,
Tapos i-subscribe back niyo din
do
po
not
yung
exist.
nag-subscribe sa inyo.
So whatever
Okay
that
po.
is.
Pero may bagong
anything
rules ngayon
that
sa
cannot
YouTube na
be
dapat
perceived by senses
manood muna ng at least 3
for
minutes video bago nyo i-subscribe yung
positivism,
para ma-count siya.
they
Kasi
do not
makikinig
exist.
mo na.
So, that's why it is very hard
Comment lang po kayo
to,
dyan para
you know,
ma-subscribe kayo ng mga
in my
viewers
previous
natin.
class, somebody wanted to study about God primarily. And I don't know how I'm going to
Mayong
study
buntag
about
mamustang
God.
okay lang glaningaw.
Maybe the belief on God can be studied, but if you want to study about God, it's a difficult thing to pursue, especially when you are wearing the hat of positivist and post-positivist, because anything that cannot be observed by senses,
Kasamok ba ng bula?
they
Talang
treat that
ginamit
as
ko na yung bula para
something
lingaw.
does not exist. So this is related to the views in the objectivity of the
Taiwan, di
social
ko na
realm
minaw
and
ano.
the idea of causation in the social process. Again, for example, Davis in 1993 emphasized that there is a predictable reality in the most objective manner as possible. Objective manner meaning devoid of any subjectivity. They also assume that genuine empirical knowledge involves universal logical structures of inferences, which results can be tested
Sa
against
klase niyo
purely
karon mga
neutral objective data. And if you want to know, you can retest it to check on if we arrive at the same level of results. Now, for post-positivist ontology, they claim that they believe in a social reality, but acceptance that knowing this reality will be always inhibited by imperfections as a result of human fallibility. Meaning, post-positivists believe
Hi
that
Ma'am Cathy
there
knows.
is no absolute reality. Rather, reality is probabilistic. I mean, probabilistic, it might and may not be. And it also believes that reality can be affected by the dynamics of time and context. For example, you conduct a survey about the performance of the president. Okay? You conduct a survey regarding the performance of the president. And today, as of today, let's assume it's today, it's a very high approval rating from Filipinos.
So, subscribe niyo po yung mga nagko-comment, tapos subscribe back niyo din yung mga nag-subscribe sa inyo.
Approval rating. Okay? So, that reality may not be absolute. Rather, it's probabilistic. And, as positivism and post-positivism put it this way, that reality is highly determined, could be affected by time and space. Time, the axis of time and space in context. So what is maybe true today, that high rating, may not be true after 20 years. We don't know. So that's what I am saying. That the conception of reality is perceived to be as closely as possible to the quote-unquote reality. Meaning there is no perfect reality. So, I'll proceed. The other one is on Interpretivist Ontology. So, a while ago, I've mentioned that the Interpretivist Ontology is highly related to the Constructivist Ontology, or the Relativism. It assumes that there are multiple realities or meanings that are constructed by humans individually and in their own context. It has both the psychological and the social dimension. By the way, I have a photo. I'm going to share it with you. Ito siya na-include, pasensya na. But I really love using this photo to explain my point. Can you see the tree?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, just to put this very simply, the assumption of interpretivism in terms of ontology is that it is both psychological and social. Psychological and social, in this case, individual minds create knowledge structures through experience and observation. The mental process being significantly informed by influences received by societal convention. So, like for example, the history and interaction with significant others, this will affect your perception of reality. So here, reality is subjective and multiple. Like if you look at the photo, kita sila, it's a tree.
Sino na po dito nakasali sa group na
Pero,
yung ginawa ko na group?
they do not
Yung
have
link nasa mga videos ko
Parehas sila
na
nakita.
ano,
They see
yung
the same
tiwala lang mamonetize tayong lahat. Andun yung link. Sali
the
kayo
same
doon.
perception of that reality. The first guy thinks it's a tree. And that's what we see, right? It's a tree. But the next guy believes it's an apple. Ang usa gusto magpalandong, ang usa gusto mo kaon ng apple. But the third person maybe is representing the business side of us. Pagkakita niya sa punuan niya na ang bungang apple, ingon siya atong ibaligya. They say the same things. The same thing. But they did not process it in the same manner. And so they did not come up with the same construction in their own head when it comes to the meaning. So that somehow tells us that reality is subjective. We see the same thing, but we interpret it differently. And it's multiple. That's a notion that we borrowed from Creswell in 2007. So, another author said that Burrell and Morgan, maybe this is a very old literature, in 1979, he believed that, they believe that it is better to understand ontology in terms of subjective and objective dimension. So what is a subjective and objective dimension? When you say subjective, reality means that something is actual depending on the mind. Meaning, the tree is actual depending on the mind. Do you get my point?
Yes, sir.
And the objective reality means is
Yes, sir.
something is actual. Something is actual. This is actual. So it exists independent of the mind. Whether you guys, these people tell me this doesn't exist, this exists. That is meant by objective reality. But subjective reality is the perception of these three little kids towards the tree. Okay? Yeah. I'll proceed to the next slide on the epistemological assumption.
Dami ko
So,
nang take note.
positivism and positivism on their epistemological
Ito,
assumption.
first. Ngayon pa lang to ha, ng araw, second,
This
third.
is like what I mentioned a while ago, the epistemological assumption is closely bound up with ontological assumption. What do you want to know? Ontological assumption. How would you want to know with what you want to know? That's epistemological assumption. So, in conjunction with the ontological assumption that reality exists independently of the observer, I'm talking about positivism here. Meaning there is the principle, the concept of dualism. Meaning na ay researcher na ako reality. Wala magpasabot na si researcher o sa reality usara. Rather, na ay reality outside of the context of the researcher. That's what we meant by dualism here. So, a positivist epistemology assumes that the investigator is detached from the object of the study and can assume an objective stance towards it. That's what we call objectivism. Meaning, galantaw ko, dili tungod kinako sa sulod. Galantaw ko, gikan sa gawas. Because usahay, it is difficult to understand, to untangle a certain problem. If you are from the you're part of the problem. But it is easier to see the problem when you're outside the problem. That's a positivist view. But for interpretivist assumption, it says, how could you understand the problem if you did not experience the problem? So that is more interpretivist. So, tanawa lang ninyo, asa mo align anang duha ka school of thought, no? It's better to look at the problem from the outside lens, so that it would be, you are not affected by the biases of the insider. Wala yun positivism. But interpretivism says, no! How could you understand a problem when you are only looking at it from the outside? When you have never been experiencing that from the inside. So the best person to understand the problem are not the outsiders, rather the insiders. Nakuha ninyo? Am I clear on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Sir, paulit po na. Wala po, sir. Sir, wala.
Saan ko ba uulitin? Which part ang kailangan kong ulitin?
Just not, sir, yung in-explain nyo lang po about the, sir, kasi nawawala po yung signal niyo, sir. Nagpuputol-putol po, sir.
Let me say it again. So when it comes to understanding, when it comes to epistemological assumptions, sabi natin, when you say epistemological, you are saying that how can we get to know with what we want to know? How can we get to know with what we want to know? So first, according to positivism, it's a dualist. It's an objectivist. Dualist meaning the researcher and the phenomena are independent from each other. That's what we call as dualism. A positivist epistemology assumes that the investigator is detached from the object of the study and can assume objective stance towards it. Because I'm not part of it, I can look at it from the objective stance. That's the assumption. So in post-positivism, the assumption of dualism is
Morning po, Richo Boy.
abandoned.
And Ma'am
And
Gladys
it is
Thomas, good
accepted that
morning.
it is not humanly possible to maintain the independence of the investigator and what is being studied. So ingon siya, now, impossible, according to post-positivism, impossible that there is 100% objectivity in conducting the study. Ingon si post-positivism. Ingon siya, no! It is not humanly possible to maintain independence of the investigator and what is being studied. Ingon siya, there is a greater awareness of the investigator's limitations, but a concomitant emphasis on the use of, ingon siya, it's very impossible that we can separate the researcher from what is being studied. Therefore, objectivity is nearly impossible. So, post-positivism, I think we are adopting the assumption of post-positivism now that researchers or investigators have limitations. So, to mitigate that, we come up with a more rigorous process, standardized methods to prevent the investigators' biases or values influencing the findings. Ito yung sinasabi kanina na ni Professor Glenn, ni Dr. Glenn. It will require data triangulation. So meaning the process, the method itself should have rigor. It should be a rigorous process in order to avoid the personal values of the researcher to influence the findings. So here, for post-positivism, there's a formal testing of hypothesis, developed in the context of a theory, and because that is
Hi, one
that
viewer.
can
Sana
be
all
externally
nanonood pa
verified.
rin.
Meaning, ay
Get
ginawa ng,
boring dito sa live ko.
reliability
Comment ka po kung sino ka one viewer.
that are put in place to make sure that data will not be affected by the person's biases. However, substantive hypotheses are never definitely proven. So there always remains a possibility
Rachel
that
Boy.
an
Hi,
alternative
Rachel
explanation will be
Boy.
found. Meaning, I mentioned this many times. Reality is not absolute, rather temporal. So the hypothesis can be proven now, but it doesn't mean that the
Studying while
hypothesis
LS.
that is proven now may be the same in the next couple of years.
Wala lang. Gusto ko lang
But,
mag-live. Parang tagal ko nang di
As far as
nakapag-live.
post-positivism and positivism are
Kahit walang
concerned,
nanonood, live pa din.
during that particular context of time and space, there is a reality that is apprehensible and
Yes po, for
totally
future.
external from the researcher. Now let us go to the last part
Nice.
on interpretivism. Actually, this is the last part of my presentation. So the epistemological assumption of interpretivism state that an interpretivist epistemology, the results of the investigation are produced by interaction between the subject and the investigator. So this is what we assume, that the knowledge is a result of a process of interaction. Nimrod, in the other lecture, said it's a result of conversation, of interlocution between and among the researcher and the participants. So knowledge is generated throughout the process of conversations. So, for the positivist, it may not require interaction between the subject and the investigator, because the investigator can just upload a survey through Qualtrics
Antok pa ako.
and request people to respond to it. When the
True.
data is generated,
Yan lang kasi ang
it
yaman
may
na
you
maiingatan
haven't
natin
even
habang
seen the
buhay. Ang knowledge. True,
respondents,
Rico Boy. True.
and you haven't even seen
Kahit
the researcher.
nakakapagod na and
As
parang
opposed to
stress
the
na,
assumption
pero
of
laban lang,
interpretivism,
tatapos din lahat.
knowledge is generated, knowledge is a product of interaction between the subject and the investigator. And this is the result of, by putting emphasis on that, on the transactional relationship of the interaction. Again, that can be best explained by Professor Ockery on her lecture on qualitative studies. But both are simultaneously changed by interaction. When I say both, I'm talking about the researcher and the researched. The two of them, the researcher and the subject, are simultaneously changed by this interaction. The worldviews are changing, so that the result that so that the knowledge that results from the process is not universally valid, but contextual and restricted to the particular time of the interaction between and among the individuals. Meaning, the knowledge generated is like it's a bond between the interaction of the researcher and the researched. It is context restricted, and it is also time restricted. So I'm saying time and space again affects the process, and even the knowledge that is being generated by both as a product of their transactional relationship. All right, so I think, let me check. I think I'm done.
I think I'm done.
I think I am done with my presentation. I'd like to know if are questions.
I don't have a question.
Anyone? Somebody is saying that hindi po clear ang audio, choppy po. Well, that is the challenge of virtual conversations. We cannot assume that everything will be perfect in this mode of delivery, but most this is recorded, therefore you can play it again if you wanted to have a good grasp of the conversation.
Yeah. Angelo, anyway, for those of your students who are concerned, we can send naman. Clear naman it from your end here. So, I think na-capture siya ng audio.
But yeah, thank you for that, Professor Octary. But I would appreciate if that happens. Because, you know, the most, for me as a researcher, it's hard to say I will quality and a quantity study without understanding kung sino ka. Ano yung mga assumptions? It's hard to proceed. Ms. Trozo, is the discussion clear with you now?
Sir, good morning.
Oo. Is it clear with you now?
Yes, sir. Thank you po.
Do you have questions? Kasi you were coming from my previous class. So I'm thinking if you have questions.
Nothing, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Trozo. Delikado yung nothing na yan. It's either you understand everything or you don't understand anything. So mahirap yung nothing na yan. So, but anyway, nothing is an answer. So thank you so much, Ms. Trozo.
Okay po, sir.
Would you like to say something?
Yes, sir. May ano lang po ako, sir. In the ontological assumption, it says that ang characteristic ng ontological is real. Looking into what is real. If, example po, if you want to study about doon sa kulungan or yung kulungan, do we need to stay there in a few days?
Well,
Get some information.
that is a valid question, Ms. Kalulong, but I will throw the question back to you. Base sa theoretical traditions, saan ka ba doon?
Di na ako mangutanag guys.
Kasi,
Back
yung
to you,
sagot mo
man
doon
din.
is nakabase kung mag-stay ka ba sa kulungan o hindi. Ms. Kalulong, would you mind?
Yes, sir. Kasi for me, sir, kung gusto mo talaga yung kunin yung ontological assumption, siguro may provision po siguro kung mag-stay tayo doon kasi kung hindi
No. You don't get my point. Both traditional assumptions, or all theoretical traditions have ontological assumptions. They vary. Pag sinabi mong the nature of reality, they vary. Kasi sabi ni positivism and post-positivism, reality, there is, the nature of reality is singular.
Hi,
While
one viewer.
the nature of reality of the interpretivist is multi-realities. So pag sinabi mong ontological assumption, ang tanong ko nga ulit sa'yo, saang kaninong ontological assumption? Assumption ba siya ni positivist, post-positivist, or ni interpretivist? Kasi silang tatlo, meron silang iba't ibang ontological assumption.
I think sir, doon po siya sa interpretivism.
Oh, yun. Pag sinabi mong interpretivism yung assumption mo, you cannot understand the reality unless you establish a transactional relationship. So yung tanong mo, kung matutulog ka ba, that is actually an epistemological assumption, a question for epistemological assumption as to how are you going to investigate the reality. So yung tanong mo, pag sinabi mong interpretivist, yung assumption
Cut ko
mo
na po,
on
guys.
epistemology,
Bye-bye. Baka
you have this kind of
tanungin ako tapos wala akong masagot.
interpretivist
Thank you
epistemological
for
assumption,
watching.
then you have to establish a transactional